Welcome to the Gospel According to Star Trek podcast. I'm Kevin C. Neese.
And I'm Tim Van Orden, and this is episode 11, Far Beyond the Scars. We'll be starting off with some Star Trek news and then discussing Discovery Season 3, Episode 3, People of Earth.
And then we'll discuss our audience question right after our main story, Far Beyond the Scars, which is discussing the concept of neighbor love in the original series episode, Let That Be Your Last Battlefield, and the Deep Space Nine episode, Far Beyond the Stars. Hope you enjoy it.
Well, that was a really good intro that we totally haven't recorded yet. We'll fix it in post.
that we totally recorded. That is completely done because we know exactly what we're doing this episode.
Wink, wink.
Wink. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Yeah, say no more. Know what I mean. Hi, how are you?
I'm doing good. How about yourself?
I'm doing okay. I found it's impossible to do the nudge, nudge, wink, wink without the accent.
What accent?
So the nudge, nudge, wink, wink, say no more, say no more. You know.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
You know what I'm talking about? Monty Python? No. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink?
I mean, I know Monty Python.
Well, you don't know it that well if you don't know nudge, nudge, wink, wink.
I'm mostly a film guy.
Okay. I understand. How are you, sir?
About as well as I was when you asked a couple of minutes ago.
The audience at home doesn't know I asked a couple of minutes ago.
No, I mean, in the
Tell
recording.
them how you are.
In the recording, you just asked.
Oh, I did?
Yeah, you'll hear it when you go back and edit this.
Oh, I'm on fire tonight. We're doing
all
great.
Right. This is going to be a great episode.
It's going to be a good episode.
Did you remember to record?
I am recording. I've been rolling for like an hour since we've been talking.
Me too.
So good, awesome. So hey, yeah, to end the nightmare of this spastic, whatever this is. Do you have any Star Trek news for us, Tim?
I do have a little bit of news. It's not like new news sort of a thing. There's just a really good review over on trekmovie.com of who is the author? Una McCormick's The Autobiography of Catherine Janeway.
Oh, cool.
It sounds really good, and I'm actually looking forward to reading the book now, having read the review. I'm gonna have to add that to my list.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's worth checking out if someone wants to go check out a review about the book.
That's cool. Well, that fills what is apparently becoming our quota of having at least one Janeway news item per episode.
Mm-hmm.
And in other news, in season 4, she changed her hair. Because everybody changes their hair in a new season.
Yeah.
Unless you're
she couldn't grow a beard.
Yeah, well, there you go. Right. She could have. Who knows? But hey. Well, that's cool. All right. Well, I was going to share also something that was kind of interesting. And I apologize. We're actually a little bit late on this. And the listener who sent this in, Becky, is actually an old friend of mine, of ours, of I want to say of the show, but the show wasn't around. That's how far back she goes. She was supporting back when we were the Undiscovered Country Project, and I was a blogger and all
we were doing the audio commentaries.
Before the audio commentaries.
Oh wow!
It was just a blog, sir. So Becky Skipper, hey, hi. If you watch some of the old Spocktoberfest videos on our YouTube channel, one of them has her as a guest on it.
So she's TOS.
She's TOS. She's TOS. And so she sent me this thing, and I wanted to check it out before I brought it on the air, and I forgot about it. But it's a Star Trek Bible study. And Tim, you may remember, when we were first getting together to record our audio commentaries, your wife Beth used to call it Star Trek Bible study.
I called it that.
Oh, you called it that?
Yeah.
I thought it was her idea.
She called it that because I called it that.
Oh, okay. You're the trendsetter.
Yes.
Yeah.
Get it straight.
Yeah. All right. Or STBS, even though we were not studying Bibles. So that was a little bit like talking about the Bible some, but like we're not. Anyway.
And I just called it that because I needed something easy to put in my Google Calendar. So I just went STBS.
STBS. There you go. It works. Well, anyway, there is an STBS, a Star Trek Bible study.
Right.
It's online. There's Zoom meetings, and it's, let's see, fellow Trekkies Josh and Jillian. I guess they have names. I guess they have last names. I saw last names in here, but anyway, Josh and Jillian. They're watching on the last Monday of October, November, and December. So we've missed it for October. It was on the 26th, but the last Monday of November and the last Monday of November, They're watching and discussing episodes of Deep Space Nine and cross-referencing with passage of scripture in their own life experience. You can email them for more info at star-trek-bible-study@googlegroups.com, and we'll put that down in the doobly-doo. And there you go.
Very
And
cool.
yeah, so I thought that was pretty cool that somebody's doing that. I don't have to get in touch with those people.
Definitely.
Say
yeah. Give them a cease and desist that this is your ballywick.
Hardly. I love finding other people. In fact, I recently followed somebody on Twitter, and I haven't listened to it yet, but it's a podcast called The Inner Light. Oh, the Inner Light Project. The Inner Light Project. I like, because I was the Undiscovered Country Project, so it's nice. The project thing. But they're run by a Star Trek nerd and his friends. Oh, whoops! I hit the mic. They're run by a Star Trek nerd and his friends, and they cover all kinds of pop culture, but they're kind of rooted in Star Trek point of view. So
very cool.
Pretty cool. Yeah, I'm excited.
There's dozens of us.
There's lots of there are all kinds of cool people out there in the Christian nerd world, but we're the best, so you don't have to go listen. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, no, we're not. But
anyway. we'll be highly insulted if you go listen to someone.
I'll be highly insulted. I'll be very happy. That's awesome. So anyway, cool. That's that. And also some of you may know Larry Nemeczek. Larry Nemeczek is a name that Tim and I know from years ago. He used to write the Star Trek companions and things, and I know him now because I helped him with a project of his, and he helped me with mine because he gave me a really nice endorsement for my book.
That was a very good endorsement.
That was a great endorsement. We had to cut it down to put it on the book, but I put the longer one on the website because it was just so nice. He wrote me this little paragraph. I'm like, dude, you're awesome. So anyway, he has a thing called Portal 47. He's Dr. Trek. He's the Trek historian and just all around nerd and great human being. I love him. They are having the Portal 47 annual open house. It is on Wednesday, November 11th. So at 7 p.m. It was originally scheduled for October 28th. It had to be postponed because of scheduling conflicts. And you can find more at larrynemeczek.com/open house. I will put that down in the link below. Check that out because Portal 47 is awesome and Larry is awesome. And if you're a nerd, you'll have fun. So there you go. That's our Star Trek news.
All right. Good job.
Fantastic. You know what else is new?
The Mandalorian.
Well, that's true, but that's not relevant to this podcast. Although that series does look really cool. Have you seen it?
Yeah, I have actually. I've watched a lot of it.
Of course you have. Star Wars nerd that you are.
Star Trek and Star Wars can both coexist.
They can. They really do. I mean, I had both hanging up in my room when I was younger.
Along with Firefly and Battlestar Galactica.
Yes.
It's all one.
Yes.
Goodness. So, anyways, we're talking about Star Trek.
We're talking about Star Trek. What is new is People of Earth.
I don't know. I think they've been around for a while.
Yeah, I was waiting for that one. I was waiting.
Not some of my better work, but
hey, even I made a really bad pun earlier today. I learned most of my pun humor from my dad, and I made this really bad pun. I said, "Well, you got to go for them, even if they're bad. You got to try."
This is true.
Because if you leave them, if you don't go for it, you're gonna miss it. So.
I saw a shirt design, or maybe it was an internet comic. I can't remember, but it was basically someone shouting about, intend your puns, damn it. Enough with this no pun intended. Intend your puns.
That's funny. That's really funny. Okay, so let's intend our episode discussion.
Shall we get around to that?
Discovery season 3, episode 3. What do you think? How'd you like it?
It was good. I enjoyed it. It wasn't an episode like the first 2 episodes were really impactful, right? They were meaningful and they were a good start to the season. The 3rd episode, it was solid. It wasn't anything earth-shattering for me.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
See what I did there?
Yeah, I see that.
Earth-shattering.
I was going to come around to that, but that's okay. You got there first. That's all right. Yeah, well, that's interesting that you say that
I mean,
because
I'm just saying it was good. I'm not saying it
yeah,
was bad or
no, I know you
anything,
weren't saying it's bad.
but I compared to the first two episodes, it wasn't as
Epic.
epic's not the right word. I guess just the first two episodes felt really profound to me, and this one was very good. I
Mhm.
again, nothing against it. It's a very classic Federation moment there with the two groups that they bring to the table.
When and Ndoye.
Yeah, the Earthers and the Raiders.
Mhm,
Very classic Federation movement, and I really like that. And
mhm,
it's going to be they're setting up for some interesting character work with Burnham,
mhm.
um, and the relationship with Saru. But it just the episode itself wasn't quite as
Did
profound, I
it
guess. I
didn't
mean,
grab you emotionally
as much as the
like as
first two.
those two?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
See, I found it at least as emotionally compelling, if not more so. I finished this episode and I was just I was overwhelmed. Like I was just like I cried through half the episode. I thought it was so I don't know half the episode, but several times in the episode, a couple times at
Mhm.
least. And of course, I do that a lot.
Yeah,
Apparently,
you are a
um,
weepy man.
I do. I am. I'm proud of it. um, but yeah, no, I loved it. I loved it so much, and I'm loving this season the more it goes on. And but yeah, I watched it, and then I watched the Ready Room episode for it, and boy, I just felt full. My heart was full. I was just like, this is everything, and it again just sort of reverberated in my head with the reiteration that this is just excellent Star Trek that I just
Mhm.
that Discovery is doing. And Will Wheaton is such a great host of the Ready Room. If you're not watching the Ready Room, you should watch it. He is such a gushy nerd. And he loves Discovery. Discovery is like his favorite since like TNG TOS. And his feelings about the series and about how this is what Star Trek is meant to be. This is what Star Trek is. This is what it's here for.
Mhm.
That's so much of how I feel about Discovery, how I've felt for a long
Yeah.
time.
I still get so angry on the internet, which it's the internet.
What
But
else do
just
you
when
do
when I
other than
see
get angry?
people complaining about Discovery not being proper Star Trek and
Hmm.
all grim dark and everything and ruining Star Trek and Gene's rolling over in his grave, I just get so angry. I just don't. I don't respond because I don't want to engage that. But it's still really frustrating, and I think that kind of eats at me a little bit.
Yeah,
I know it shouldn't. I need to just let it go.
yeah. I think you should too. I do. I mean, I don't pay much attention to what fans are saying, like in the fan community, that
Mhm.
much, because it so quickly devolves into that.
Yeah.
And I will talk with other fans who like you and friends of mine and stuff who I know are enjoying the series, and I like to delight in Star Trek. I'll pick it apart when I
Mhm.
need to, when I feel it's warranted, but I don't know, some of the stuff that's going on right now, I'm
Yeah.
just not. I just can't get caught up in it. And I think it's just the internet. I don't think it's reality.
That's fair.
But yeah,
So there was a
so
lot to like in this episode.
a lot. Yeah, you were you started talking about that reconciliation scene between Wen and Ndoye. Wen being the raider guy and Ndoye being the captain of Earth Defense.
Okay.
Both actors I loved immediately when I saw them.
Mhm.
And Chris Heyerdahl, the guy who plays Wen, I know that name. When I heard the name, I was like, oh, I should know him, but I can't think of where I know him from at all. I neglected to look him up. The actor who
You
plays
looked really familiar.
yeah, I'm sure we'd know him. The actor who plays Ndoye, I've forgotten her name, but you know, but she was just somebody. Both of them were just like, you see their faces and you see their performances, and they're just sometimes an actor that you just lock into and just draws you in. And both of them were just like, oh wow, you're cool. I want to see more of you. I don't know. I just like them both instantly. And
Okay.
I thought, man, I need to get the name of the actor who plays Ndoye, because I thought her performance was so great. Not like it was like she was chewing the scenery or anything, but there's this undercurrent in that character where she has to be all like defensive and hard-nosed and hard to get along with and everything at first, but then she has to have that empathy and she has to have somebody real human underneath it. And I thought she played that tone very well. Fumzile Sitole, that's her. Fumzile Sitole. And she hasn't done a ton. She was on like 16 episodes of Orange is the New Black. That's the main thing people know her from. But on the Ready Room, Jonathan Frakes told the story that she was ready to retire after this. She was going to quit doing auditions, and being on the set and doing this episode really kind of revived her love for acting, and let's stick with it. Yeah, isn't that great?
That is very cool.
It's awesome. And it's a credit to Jonathan too as a director. So but yeah, the scene. So let's talk about that scene between the two of them. Sorry, I'm rambling. I'm just getting off on what's on my head about this scene, but let's talk about that. That moment between them. How did you feel about the way it was played, the way it worked out?
Well, we were talking about this a little bit off the air before the recording, but the first thing I thought about when Giorgio kicked the guy and took his helmet off was like, oh boy, I hope he doesn't need that to breathe.
I did too. And the way Heyerdahl plays it a little bit, you go, oh no, he's gonna suffocate. Yeah, I thought the same thing. But it was so great. What was her line? Diplomacy is so slow. She's just like, we'll just get it. Don't talk him into taking the helmet off. We're just gonna take it. And that's kind of the role that I think Giorgio plays, Giorgio plays in this series, is just to kind of every once in a while go, oh, for goodness sakes, guys, just do it.
Yeah.
Just get to it. She's great. Great impatient motivator.
But yeah, no, it was a good scene. It was a classic. I think I mentioned this earlier in the episode, maybe earlier in the pod, but it was a classic Federation mediation moment. You know, it's the sort of thing that you think the Starfleet is there for, to negotiate peace between two warring factions.
Right. Well, and the whole theme of like, once we take our masks off, we find we're the same underneath. You know?
Yeah.
There's so much othering in our culture. The challenge is always to move from othering to one anothering. You know, there are all the one another's in the Bible, but the chief one is love one another, right? And I think we can't love one another until we see one another, and we can't see one another until we drop our defenses and look past each other's defenses and listen to each other and try to learn from one another. I mean, and you know, just that moment of that's what I love about Giorgio sort of, you know, knocking Wen's helmet off, is it thrusts his humanity at Ndoye. You know, just absolutely confronts her with it, and that it's a comical moment that she kicks his leg and knocks his helmet off,
right?
But it's such a great reveal to come down off that laugh to, you're human. And what's great about it too is you've got a black woman and a white man, and what they see is each other's humanity. So like he's got a literal physical mask on his head, right? But then when he takes his mask off, what they've got looking at each other in the 32nd century are things that we see in one another, and some people might shrink away from. They might immediately begin to make judgments about that other person because they're that race, because they're that gender. But they don't do that at all. It's just, oh, you're human.
Oh, you're like me.
Yeah. And that is a really beautiful thing to see and to think about, that and I hope it's a sooner coming day, but that there is a day when we can look at each other and not see those metaphorical masks, but see our sameness, see ourselves as like one another. It was just like a little, you know, subtext of let that be your last battlefield in there. But I love that, and I loved that we did the thing where we just put them face to face and talked and just forced them to talk. And what a difference that makes, just a little bit of talking, just a little bit of telling your story, and just a little bit of listening to the other person's story.
Mm-hmm.
What a difference that makes.
And it strikes me, there's a moment there that makes that it's like how, like, I know people, okay, this is really, I'm trying to figure out how to start to solve and still make it relate. But it's like, I know people who are a certain political affiliation or another, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the other affiliation assumes that one side is just a certain way, but yet you can put, like, I know people of this one affiliation that you put someone of a different affiliation next door to them and they'll give them the shirt off their back.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it just reminds me of that sense of, I don't know how I'm trying to say it.
Proximity, immediacy.
Yeah.
And
that if we just would extend that to the people that we don't like, our enemies, and see them as our neighbor, I think that love, that inherent divine spark within us would take over, and we would give them the shirt off our backs.
Yeah. And I mean, even just the phrase shirt off your back, I mean, we have that in our vocabulary because of Jesus, right? And it's so true though. And it's so right, that when Jesus says to love your enemy, I mean, what he's really saying is make a neighbor of your enemy. When he tells the story of the Good Samaritan, he's telling the story to somebody where he says, love your neighbor as yourself. He says, the whole of the law and the gospel, the law and the prophets is on these two things: love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. Everything else depends on these two. And then some guy raises his hand and is like, okay, so who is my neighbor? And it's like the kid who wants to know, like, what's the minimum we have to get in order to pass this test?
Right.
What's the lowest grade? What is the stuff we need to know so that we're sure to pass the test, so that I can study just enough to get by and get on to the next thing, right? And Jesus then tells the story of the Good Samaritan. It's important to have that context, because the person asks, who is my neighbor? And then Jesus tells the story of the Good Samaritan, and the man is beaten and left for dead, which, I'm speaking to a bunch of Jews, you probably assume he's a Jewish man, beaten and left for dead. And then all these high priestly Jews, the Levite and the priest, and all these teacher of the law, they walk by. And then it's the Samaritan who takes the guy to the inn and all that. And the Samaritans are the enemies of the Jewish people. I mean, there's nobody they hate more. And at the end of the story, it's who was a neighbor to the man who was beaten and left for dead. And you have to say it's the Samaritan. And so his answer to the question is not, it's like, no. You don't look for the definition of who your neighbor is. You make a neighbor out of everybody, because they could be your neighbor. You be a neighbor by how you act, right? You choose to be the neighbor. And so when we love our enemies, you're absolutely bang on. I love the way you said that you love them like a neighbor, because they are you. You start to see them as a neighbor, even though they're your enemy. That's a hard thing to do, but we get those points of recognition when we listen. When we truly listen, not listen waiting for an opportunity to jump in and say something,
right?
But listen seeking understanding. That's so important. Wow, we had one scene and we did all that.
Yeah, I think we found our main topic.
It's a pretty short scene. Yeah, maybe.
Is there anything else we want to geek out about?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh my goodness, Captain Saru, dude, Captain Saru.
Captain Saru is pretty cool.
Oh, come on, this is great. On our Saru episode, we talked about it. We were like, okay, should Michael be the captain or should Saru be the captain? I think we were both leaning towards Saru as the captain.
Yeah, I think so too.
It's the right thing.
It was. It absolutely is the right thing. I think I'm trying to decide how I felt about Michael handing it to him like that, because it almost felt like she was giving it to him as if it was hers to give.
Well, it almost is, because at this point she's basically in the upper echelons of what is the Federation right now. But then also it was between the two of them, and it was a conversation that they were going to have. And Saru was going to encourage Michael to take it, and Michael was going to encourage Saru to take it. And Michael's just like, I'm not even going to ask for it. You're the man. Like, I'm not going to take that for a second, you know?
Yeah, and given kind of the struggle with reintegrating she's going with the rest of the episode, I kind of couldn't help but wonder if maybe it wasn't so much I think Saru deserves this as I don't want to have anything to do with it. Like she wasn't ready for it, so she had no qualms about passing it off to someone else.
That's true. I mean, she had experienced a shift, right? And that's what Saru kind of hones in on. I mean, it's very sweet, and everything she says is true about Saru. She's not wrong, and I know she believes all those things. It's always been you. I mean, absolutely. Of course, it's always been Saru. And by the way, a minute ago when I said you're the man, that sounded like you are the male, therefore you should take it. That's not what I mean. I was using that in the colloquial sense, like you are the person who is right for this job. So just saying. but he is the person who's right for the job. And before I get off onto Michael, I want to say one quick thing. This is the first time we have had in an ongoing Star Trek series an alien as captain of our main ship. I am so happy about that.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Oh, and not a half human,
right?
Full on weird as heck looking
and
alien.
Yeah, not even a human, or not even an alien that just happens to have pointy ears.
Right.
But like
he's got
full on
hooves.
prosthetics. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's great. I love it. It warms my heart to no end. It's like, yay. So long wanted to see more alien captains in Star Trek, and to have the main captain of the series at this point be an alien, it makes me so happy. And to be Doug Jones, I mean, come on, you can't ask for better. That's great. But yeah, getting back to Michael, yeah, there's something else going on with her, and he notices that. He
does really hone in on that, doesn't he?
Well, it's like we talked about last in the Saru episode. He's so sensitive. He's so perceptive. You know, he sees past people's layers and like sees what they're feeling and what they're thinking. Oh, it was last episode that we talked about that with him and Tilly.
Yeah.
But yeah, he and so he has that perception, he has that ability, and that intuition. And what's interesting about Michael in this episode is that she has spent a year away. What is it that she says? I wrote it down because I'm good like that. We have work to do. She said, well, it's the scene between the two of them, you know, where, you know, she says, and looking at the telescope of all things, I should have told you about my plan. And Saru says, yes, you should have. Trust must remain an assumption between us. And she says, we have work to do, and I would be proud to do it by your side, but there are things in my year here that I let go of, and I need time to find my way back to them if I can. And Saru says, I will trust you to grow through change as you have trusted me. And then Michael says, then it would be my privilege to be your number one. But that thing that she's talking about there are things that have happened. There are things that I've let go of. I've moved away. You know, how can I come? You know, I don't know if I can come back. I don't know how to come back. I don't know if I can. I mean, it's something a lot of people go through in a lot of situations. You know, I don't want to centralize it toward anything particular as an intentional interpretation. But the way I felt watching that scene was that I and so many other people feel so uncomfortable with Christian religion, feel so uncomfortable with churches. which is weird, like, because I've always like listened to Christian market music and read a lot of theology and whatever, always been interested in Jesus, right?
Mhm.
But religion itself, and churches in particular, institutional churches in particular, have been a serious point of hesitancy and disconnection for me, for a long time. And it's just in recent years that I've done any kind of reconnecting. And even at that, it's still hesitant. It still stops and starts, and I still don't know what to make of it and all that sort of stuff. I'm still
Mhm.
conflicted with my relationship to institutional churches. But I feel like that is how people approach, how people feel toward institutional churches. How people feel when they drift away from at least the version of Christianity that they grew up with,
Mhm.
and they're not sure if faith is still there for them. They're not sure, quite honestly, if God is still there for them. And I just want to take this moment right now to say that if you relate to that, I want you to hear Saru's words again. Go back and watch that scene and listen to Saru's words, because to me, Saru is speaking what God speaks to all of us. I will trust you to grow through change. In other words, you can come back in here, you can enter into a relationship with me as hesitantly as you know how. You can do it in as broken a fashion as you can muster. You can do it as feeling as distant and as dislocated and as lost as you do right now. You can do it thinking, I think I just doubt all of this. I think I just doubt all of this, you know? But when Jesus said all it takes is a mustard seed of faith, sometimes that mustard seed just looks like being willing to ask the questions to God, you know? And I believe that God says that to us. I trust you to grow through change. Because I think when we feel like we've fallen away, when we feel like we can't come back, when we feel like um, we're lost and hopeless and whatever, I think we're just changing. I think we're just growing. And if we recognize through that growth that we're growing, something is growing. We're something is happening with us, that we're growing and we're changing. And if we can move through that change, God is not surprised by that change. God is not overwhelmed by that change. God is not angry or disappointed by that change. God is right there with us, no matter how hard it is for us to see that. And don't associate, you know, institutions that you may be hurt by with God, because institutions are just human things that are aiming at God. Um, there are ways that we can get to God. There are ways that we can help access God. But man, just know that God trusts you to to grow through change. That's very important to me personally. I just That was how I felt about that scene. That was how I felt about that moment. I feel like I'm doing all the talking, but I have a segue in mind if you don't mind.
No, go ahead.
See, you do all the talking you did last episode, and I guess I just have to make up
Yeah,
for it next episode.
yeah, that's what it was.
But it brings to mind then the scene with the tree
Mhm.
at the old Starfleet Academy. It's amazing sometimes what you find that's still there, right where you left it. You know,
Hmm.
uh, the Bible talks about the Ebenezer stone. An Ebenezer stone is a stone of remembrance, right? And you might place that stone at a certain place, or you might stack stones, over time in a certain place, even to make an altar, um, to commemorate, to remember, because that stone is still in that place, right? Um, and we can leave those markers for ourselves, and we can find those markers sometimes when we're not even looking for them. And there's something in you, if you're questing and you're seeking and you're in this tailspin of where you just think everything you do is doubt, that's fine. Doubt is part of faith, and doubt is part of learning. Doubt is part of being human. Don't let that shake you up, right? The fact that you might be concerned about that, or you might be upset about that, means that there's somewhere in you, there's that Ebenezer somewhere in you, there's that thing that's still there, that kernel. It might be a mustard seed, but Jesus said that mustard seed grows into a giant, like a big tree. Now, the real mustard seed doesn't grow into a big tree, right? But the mustard seed of faith does. It grows into the biggest tree in the forest, Jesus says. And I just think of the girth of that tree, that massive tree.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, man, it's still here. It's still here. It's even bigger and stronger than I realized. The question is, where are you rooted? Where are you grounded? In what soil and at what place do you find who you are? Do you connect? I think of Tilly, getting close to the bark and just like hugging that tree, and it's just like, hey, old friend, how are you?
Mm-hmm.
And
the comment that at some point we've all studied under this tree right here.
Yeah. I studied under this tree. I did too, like it was a daily practice for me to come to this tree and to study and to try to learn and try to open myself and try to do what I needed to do to get ahead in life. It was maybe something I didn't even think about that much. It was just a tree that I like to sit under and read, but it's still there, and we can be like that tree because we have a strong root. Even if you don't have a strong root in being raised in a church or whatever, there is a root in you. There's a root in all of us that longs to know what it means to be human and longs to be something greater than the sum of our DNA. And when you can find that, thing that hopes when it's hopeless, when you can find that light in the darkness, that's the flicker. That's the flashlight in the dark, as Gene Roddenberry called God. That's what that is. And you'll find it. You'll find your roots that maybe somewhere you just don't even expect, but look for it and hang on to it. You will grow. It takes time, but you will grow. And
you might have to root around for it a little bit.
Right. Yes, absolutely. You might have to till the soil. That's very true. But I just found that so moving and so profound and so beautiful, that whole theme in this episode, because one of the things, watching the ready room for this episode, they had on Jonathan Frakes. I mean, if you can watch it, go watch it. Jonathan Frakes is great, but they also had Bowie Kim and Erica Lippold, who were two of the chief writers, the two chief writers for this episode. And one of the things that Erica talked about was that they had been looking through this episode and through this, and really through the season so far, is let me look up her exact words. How does disconnectedness affect us? And boy, aren't we in a time of disconnectedness?
Amen.
I mean, not just like pandemic conditions, right?
Mm-hmm.
But even when we were going out and seeing each other in the real world, how disconnected are we? How disconnected were we? When we were talking about the people on the internet, I mean, the reason they get so angry on the internet is because they can, and because it makes them feel powerful, because there's nobody there who's real to shout back at them. And if they do shout back at them, it's energizing and they can get into a fight and they feel all tough because you can't hurt me with words and all that kind of stuff, which you can, by the way, but still.
Yeah.
But we're so disconnected. And so the fact that Star Trek is now exploring that question, how does disconnectedness affect us, I think is really important, because Star Trek has always been about connection and has always been about community. And so whenever it's challenged, I think we can really find some fodder for hope. Yeah. So I see in that tree and everything, and everything they're doing, they're looking for connection. I'm looking for connection for 3 episodes.
Yeah.
And in this episode, I feel like we're starting to find it together as a group. But we got some growing to do, but that's okay. So.
Yeah. Well said.
This is the part where you jump in with something, Tim.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Don't you have anything?
I don't. I'm sorry.
Oh man. man.
I'm just sort of basking in the wisdom.
Oh, shucks, sir. And then there's this great moment toward the end of the episode where Michael says, if things were easy, and Book finishes her sentence, they wouldn't be worth it. And yeah, that's about right. That's about right. None of this is easy. It's never going to be easy. But if you can embrace the uneasiness, knowing that, you know, you're held in a hand that will not let you fall, you'll make it. You'll be okay. It'll be worth it. Because it's not easy. And cake is eternal.
The cake is a lie.
No, cake is eternal.
No, I know. I understood that reference.
It's not Portal, it's Star Trek.
it's a knee-jerk reflex at this point.
Yeah, I know. The same thing. Cake is eternal. Yeah. So what else did you notice in this episode that you think is worth discussing? How are we on time and all that stuff?
Well, we're about 5 minutes over our half-hour allotment.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll have some editing I'll do.
Okay.
All right. I did find one Easter egg in this episode.
Oh, okay. Bring it.
I'm pretty sure about this. Are you ready?
Hold on. Okay, now I'm ready.
Displacement activated spore hub drive. Now, when Stamets is explaining to Adira all the things, he unveils all their secrets, and he says it's called the displacement activated spore hub drive, but nobody calls it that. Displacement activated spore hub drive -D. As in NCC 1701 -D.
That's
Come on.
Clever. No,
Come
that
on.
was cool.
That's gotta be.
That's funny.
Be.
Yeah, no, Beth turned to me when we were watching that and she was like, dashed?
Oh, really?
Yeah, she didn't take it. She almost got there.
Yeah, almost.
She came closer than I did. I was like, wow, that's a mouthful. But I guess we were both distracted at that scene where like he barely knows her and he's just spilling everything.
Yeah.
Like so much for that whole secrecy thing Saru was talking about like one scene earlier.
Right. Well, it's the 32nd century. Well, and he's figured out that there's something else going on with Adira. Which, by the way, what do you think of Adira?
The jury's still out.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. It definitely helped at the end there to reveal that they're a trill.
That's yes.
And I mean, that opens up some more questions like, were there no trills around at Discovery's initial time?
Well, that's the thing. They talk about it, that the only reason they know what a trill is the sphere data. Like they had kind of vaguely heard of them here and there or whatever, but they didn't even know that they took on hosts.
Right, but I seem to have been under the impression that trill were around.
They might have been around
at that time.
They might have existed, but
I guess they weren't part of the Federation.
Yeah, the Federation didn't know about them, not until
obviously they were around.
Obviously, but because in TNG, that Trill episode in TNG was the first Trill episode that introduced the species, and they were kind of mysterious then. So they're a very new thing in terms of like 24th century Federation understanding, but in 32nd century, not only are the Trill known, but they can have human hosts apparently.
Yeah, that's interesting because I seem to recall the couple of times they've tried that in other Star Trek episodes. I think they tried it once in TNG with Riker taking the host temporarily, and then
that's right.
I want to say in DS9 at some point the Dax symbiote was inserted into a human.
Yeah.
But I could be wrong.
Yeah. There was something like that. I do remember, but I definitely remember the one with Riker for sure.
I think part of what kind of snagged me for a second was Beth turns to me once Adira starts being super knowledgeable with everything. She's like, Beth turns to me and she's like, I think we have our new Wesley.
Oh, that was the wrong thing to say for you.
Well, I've come around on Wesley.
You have, but you still, I mean, I know, especially early on, he's not your favorite, but yeah, well, I mean, sort of, definitely it's the Whiz Kid for sure, but
the reasoning for that is now because of the
because the Trill
host.
symbiote, and because it's a nerdy kid in the 32nd century. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
And
I just want to clarify, in case Will Wheaton ever happens to listen to our podcast, I don't hate Wesley now.
No.
I loved him, and then I got on the bandwagon of, Wesley saves the day, and then I came back around and I love Wesley again.
Well, good. I love Wesley too, and I love Will Wheaton.
Like, I had a sweater when I was in, gosh, how old was I when TNG was around? Junior high? No, it started in 87, so I would have been in elementary school.
Right.
Yeah, we would have been in elementary school. I had a sweater that was gray and had a blue shoulder run and a red stripe around that little shoulder run, and it had a triangle baseball patch on it. But I called that sweater my Wesley Crusher sweater because the way it looked and the color and everything. I would definitely put that sweater on and pretend I was Wesley Crusher.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
So I've come a full 360, not just 180, but 360, back where I started.
Right. That's awesome. See, I never had anything like that when I was growing up. Never had any, stuff quite that cool where I could be. I think there were a couple of shirts that I was like, well, I can think of this as a Starfleet uniform shirt, sort of, if I squint.
Right.
But I have a shirt now that just straight up, it's ribbed, but it straight up looks like a TOS tunic. And my Halloween costume one year was to print up a science badge from TOS and just tape it on to the spot with packing tape. That was my costume. And it was so funny because my son, he was pretty little at the time, and he came up to me and he just looked up, he says, "You look like Captain Kirk." And I was like, well, actually Spock, because Kirk's in command. But oh, you're so great, thank you, you're brilliant.
Nice.
Yeah.
Now, I'm pretty sure I've got around very accessible a Polaroid of me in my 6th grade costume that my mom had sewn for me, a first season TNG uniform.
That's awesome.
I loved that thing.
We're gonna have to get that picture and put it on.
Yeah, that's gonna happen.
Yeah, this is going to launch our Instagram account.
Oh boy.
Oh man. So the thing that we've kind of settled in on and sort of been talking about in this episode, one of the things we've talked about, more than one thing, but one of the things that resonates to me is loving our neighbors, and you made that great point about turning an enemy into a neighbor. And there are a couple of Deep Space Nine, there are a couple of Star Trek episodes, one from the original series and one from Deep Space Nine, that deal particularly with the kinds of things, we talked about that scene in Discovery where you had a black woman and a white man, and the thing that they recognize about each other that surprises them and brings them together is that they're both human. Right. And that those sort of masks that we put on each other, really, of our race and our gender and things, just don't even occur to them at all. And so these two episodes kind of deal with race specifically, but they deal with othering, and particularly we deal with othering and enemies in this original series episode, Let That Be Your Last Battlefield, which you have recently screened, sir.
I did. Watched it just today in order to be current on it for for our recording, and it was a treat. It's always fun after watching something as technologically advanced as Discovery in terms of its CGI and effects and everything, and then to go back to TOS.
Yes.
Where they're like, half of his body is painted black, the other half is white, and they're like, this is such a strange being.
Right. And it's very on the nose, isn't it? I mean, the black on the left, black on the right. I mean, it's very on the nose.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely cultivated to sort of get past censors, but it's just not far off the mark.
Right.
You know, I told a story in, you know, 'cause the reason I didn't review the episode is I've seen it a few times, and and I talked about it in maybe my favorite chapter of the book, one of my very favorite chapters of the book, which is chapter 6 in the original series section, neighbor, what is it? Last Battlefields and Neighbor Love. And I talked about the fact that you know, I met somebody who was asking the nuns at his Catholic school, you know, about what was going on when he was seeing race riots on the televisions and stuff, and you know, police turning hoses and dogs on, you know, on average citizens. And the nuns told him, you know, some people just don't know their place. And
what?
yeah, that's what he was told.
Wow.
And it's just like, I mean, that's a kick in the chest to think that, and that wasn't that long ago, right? That wasn't that long ago. And but he told the story of, then later, you know, I mean, the way you tell the story, it sounds like it's the same day, but I mean, then later, you know, at home watching Star Trek, he saw Let That Be Your Last Battlefield. And that, and I said, you know, did you get the message? And he was like, oh yeah, immediately. Like right then and there. That totally, you know, showed me that that view was wrong, and that, you know, I got the message 100%. And of course, it's a message that was not welcome on television, you know, at that time. But Star Trek was able to get it through. And it's weird just how thinly veiled it is, you know.
Yeah.
Because it communicates that well to I don't know what he was, like a 13, 12-year-old kid, something like that, you know, and it communicated that well to him. And you know, it's definitely, I don't know, how did you feel about the overall like point and message of the episode? Like, how did you feel about its you know, where its narrative thrust took us in terms of what it was saying about the enmity between these two people?
It was very disheartening how relevant it still is.
Yeah. Because it's not a thing that's gone away.
Right. Now, I will say, like, the arc that's come from TOS, where you've got the you know, the two quote unquote races, to DS9, where a black man is writing about a black man as a captain, to that scene in Discovery that we both loved so much.
Yeah.
Just the arc there, that is so hopeful, because you can see the curvature, you know, of that arc, as I think it was Martin Luther King Jr. that paraphrased, my wife pointed out he paraphrased someone about the moral arc of justice.
There's an arc to the moral universe that bends toward justice.
Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, there's seeing all three of these episodes together was very cool to see that.
Yeah. To see that progress.
Arc, and yeah.
And the thing I want to be careful about, and particularly in the context of Star Trek, because I think Star Trek, and it's working against this, I think maybe a newer Star Trek, and particularly like, you know, Deep Space Nine forward. Okay. Deep Space Nine showed a lot of things up about Star Trek. But it definitely kind of leans a little bit too much on this conceit that humanity progresses as time progresses.
Right.
Like we've had more years. You know, like it's funny. There was some movie, you know, when I was a kid in the 80s, I remembered people saying, come on, this is the 80s, you know, like we need to get with it. It's the 80s. And I was watching this movie and somebody said, come on, it's the 70s. And I thought that was so funny, you know. And now, of course, because who would think the 70s were modern? It's the 80s. I mean, that's ridiculous, right? I mean, to a kid.
Right.
And now looking back on that, it's like, well, who thinks any decade, you know, gives you, you know, it means something in and of itself, that somehow we should be more progressed because this is the 90s, this is the, you know, the 2010s, whatever it is, right?
Well, I think that speaks to hope doesn't it? That we
It
hope
does.
that we've gotten better by then.
Well, exactly. I mean, you would say, like, a lot of people, you hear a lot of people saying, this stuff happens in media and stuff happens in culture, and people say, how is this happening in 2020?
Mhm.
As though we expect the calendar to do the work for us. And that's kind
Right.
of where I want to sort of amend or come alongside that statement from Dr. King, because I don't think it's wrong that the arc of the moral universe bends toward justice, particularly because I believe in a God who gets what God wants at the end of all things,
Mhm.
that God is about the business of drawing us to God's self,
Mhm.
and bringing forth the fullness of everything that our lives in this universe has been to be. But at the same time, you can get lazy if you expect the
Mhm.
calendar to do the work for you.
Yeah, no, that
Right.
the let that be your last battlefield. They've had 50,000 years to
Mm,
get over this hatred,
bang
and
on.
all they've done is wipe out their entire planet.
Exactly. And when Loki and, oh my goodness, I forgot the other guy's name.
It
Loki
starts
and
with starts with the B.
B. I know it's like Bartleby, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
I can't
Bartleby.
remember Bartleby. Anyway,
Berlin, Barry,
oh my
Bob.
gosh. No, we have to look it up.
Oh, no, let's go
Uh,
with Bob. We'll call him Bob.
Bob, Look and Bob. Let me go back. I've known these names forever, and I just totally lost it just now. Um, but when they go back to their planet, they even still continue. They perpetuate, and they hunt each other to extinction. Bailey,
They do?
is the other guy.
How do we know
And,
they? I don't
well, I
recall
know they
that.
hunt each other to extinction, but they don't stop fighting. Um,
I
isn't
don't
that
think we
right?
see
Don't they?
anything. Once they beam down to the planet, that's the last we hear of them.
I thought
I
they.
mean, we presume they're going to continue
The war.
yeah, but
Okay. Beam down to the planet with alien pursuit. Yeah, okay, that's true. All right. Well, I guess I always just envisioned them continuing the conflict. Maybe they didn't, but I get the feeling that they continued the conflict.
I don't know. I guess I have a little bit of hope that seeing your entire planet in
Destroyed.
ruins would shock some sense into you.
One would hope.
One would hope.
One would hope.
And that
But
is
that's
the theme of Discovery.
yes, it is. Yes, it is. Hope is definitely. I think as we talked about earlier. I mean, the theme certainly lately, the season, and probably the theme of the series is hope. Well, I mean, hope is a huge Star Trek idea,
Mhm.
but that's the thing. When we talk about the arc of the moral universe that bends toward justice, I think a biblical worldview, particularly, says that we are to be about the business of doing the bending, of bending
Mhm.
that arc, of helping to many people will use the term co-creators with God to describe humanity,
Mhm.
that we are participants in God's creation, we are participants in God's work, we are the hands and feet of Jesus, as they say. um,
Mhm.
and that's that's part of it. It doesn't
You
just
know,
happen without us.
yeah, that makes me think of that final scene in Far Beyond the Stars where Benny's having the breakdown, right? And all of his coworkers, all of
Hmm.
these white people in the room, like they feel bad for him.
Hmm.
They hand him his cane as he's on his way out to the hospital, but none of them actually step out into any sort of danger to themselves to
Hmm.
to extend that arc.
Hmm.
to
Yeah,
to
and
them, him doing, they're just observers. They stand back and watch him try to do the bending by trying to get his story published,
mhm.
and none of them, sure, they'll argue with their boss a little bit, but they know nothing's going to come of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you might have a point there. I think you might have a point there. But before we get off of Let That Be Your Last Battlefield, though, real quickly, I do want to say that at the end of the episode, um, they're I'm looking at the transcript. They're looking at the thing, at their sensor readings, and
Mhm.
they said, It's Bele, Captain, and another life form has appeared on Chiron. And Uhura says it doesn't make any sense. Spock says, to expect sense from two mentalities of such extreme viewpoints is not logical. And Sulu says, but their planet's dead. Does it matter which one's right? And Spock says, not to Lokai and Bele. All that matters to them is their hate. And Uhura says, do you suppose that's all they ever had, sir? And Kirk says, no, but that's all they have left. And then warp factor 2 and they fly off. So to me, that always felt like they haven't given up the fight. Or at least we're assuming they haven't given up the fight, you know.
Because they have nothing left.
They have nothing left. And again, that's, you know, it's what you cultivate, right? That's what you have. You know, we talked in the Discovery episode about rootedness, right? Where you're rooted and what seed you plant and all that. But yeah, you have to, if all you do, it can overtake you, right? It can completely overtake you.
What you were saying about hatred and such reminded me of, you know, the fruits of the spirit. Everyone always likes to talk about the fruits, the love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, all that stuff. But I mean, there a few verses before that, it very clearly outlines, you know, what's not fruits of the spirit, and included in that is hatred, discord, jealousy, fits of rage, selfish ambition, dissensions, factions.
Yeah. Boy, that all sounds familiar, doesn't it?
Doesn't it, though?
Especially when you take into consideration that the difference between Lokai and Bele is not just black and white, it's left and right.
Right.
Not to put too fine a point on it.
Right. But considering when this comes out, we can't.
Yeah. Considering the day this drops. You know, we're in the midst of things right now that are so, I mean, divisive is a word that's thrown about so much, but so much in
so contentious,
so othering, you know. And yeah, I think, you know, we can look at, you know, you can look at, like you say, the progress in these 3 episodes. You know, Far Beyond the Stars, of course, deals with racial issues much more directly, right? I mean, we take Ben Sisko, we put him in the life of Benny Russell in the 1950s, you know, and he directly experiences racism, while Casey Hunter and the other women around him also experience sexism. And then we see that kind of, you know, at least on some level, you know, seem to have sort of evaporated by Discovery. And like you said, that's a very hopeful picture, you know, and it's one I think we should have, that hopeful picture. Just like you're saying how Last Battlefield rings so true. Far Beyond the Stars rings true as well. But it's weird because, like in Star Trek, we so often will talk about like an alien conflict, and then that sort of lays over into an earthbound conflict. But in this case, you know, in a very rare instance, really, we're going to a specific time, a specific place. We're talking about a specific thing in American history and life and culture. And yet we view it with Star Trek eyes, because it's about something more. It's about Ben Sisko, right, and his life. And so we can extrapolate out from it, I think, not just to the racial injustices that continue, the racial divisions that continue, but the other ways in which we fear and harm and persecute other people for being different in today's world.
You talked about the fear, and to me, I keep coming back to, like, you know, there's this talk of this nebulous we, right?
Yeah.
But for me, I keep coming back to I. What am I doing? There's I was reading through some stuff several months ago, and I came across Martin Luther King's Jr. "I've Been to the Mountaintop" speech, where he he's examining the parable of the Good Samaritan, right? We were talking about this the other day, I think. And he's talking about, he's looking at the religious leaders that didn't stop to help, right?
Yeah, yeah. Uh-huh.
And I'm gonna just read from it a little bit here because, but I'm gonna tell. So he's saying, he's talking about why they didn't stop, and he goes over all the sort of reasons that we kind of tend to extrapolate onto them. But then he goes on, but I'm going to tell you what my imagination tells me. It's possible that those men were afraid. You see, the Jericho Road is a dangerous road. I remember when Mrs. King and I were first in Jerusalem. We rented a car and drove from Jerusalem down to Jericho. And as soon as we got on that road, I said to my wife, I can see why Jesus used this as the setting for his parable. It's a winding, meandering road. It's really conducive for ambushing. You start out in Jerusalem, which is about 1,200 miles, or rather 1,200 feet above sea level. And by the time you get down to Jericho, 15 or 20 minutes later, you're about 22 feet below sea level. That's a dangerous road. In the days of Jesus, it came to be known as the Bloody Pass. And it's possible that the priest and the Levite looked over that man on the ground and wondered if the robbers were still around. Or it's possible that they felt that the man on the ground was merely faking and he was acting like he had been robbed and hurt in order to seize them over there, lure them there for a quick and easy seizure. And so the first question that the priest asked, the first question that the Levite asked was, if I stop to help this man, what will happen to me?
Yeah.
But then the Good Samaritan came by and he reversed the question. If I do not stop to help this man, what will happen to him?
Yeah. Yeah. Bang on. I love that. I absolutely love that. And it goes right to what you were saying about that scene when everybody's just kind of standing there and not knowing what to say. Like, yeah, they hand him his cane and whatever. And uh, you know, there's a paralysis in the room, even among people who care to do something. And Benny does care to do something. He cares to step out and say something, and he stands up, right? And he pays the price for it. I mean, he pays it hard.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody else in the room is like,
I might lose my job. I
yeah,
might.
I got bills too, man. I got a family,
Mm-hmm.
I value my physical safety, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's risky. And Benny Russell is the one who's willing to step out and take that risk.
Is he? I mean, yes. Obviously, he's willing, but I just wonder. I feel like he doesn't have as much of a choice as
Yes.
the observers do.
Absolutely. And I love the way Avery plays this role too, because everything is so deep in him. It just comes from his core.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see that the wall that Benny has built up to protect himself, to survive, to get by, just crumbling, and everything is coming out. And I keep coming back to that line that Douglas Papps, the character played by Rene Auberjonois, the publisher,
Mm-hmm.
or the editor, whatever, says, it's just a photo, Benny.
Yeah.
It's just a photo saying that Benny needs to sleep late on the same day that Casey Hunter needs to sleep late, so that people don't know she's a woman. By the way, little nod to DC Fontana there, Dorothy Fontana.
Nice.
Yeah, right. So I mean, that's why she was DC Fontana, because early in her career she did kind of play coy with the fact that she was a woman.
Did not know that.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously in person people knew that. I mean, it's the same kind of thing
Sure.
as on the
Mm-hmm.
but and Pabst kind of writes it off too, where he's just like, the public is just going to have to do without their amazing stories, or whatever it is, this week. And it's not just a photo, right? It's not just a story. Why is Benny Russell fighting so hard, for a story in a magazine? I mean, a magazine it's out this week. It's forgotten maybe 2 weeks from now, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But it's, you know, I know this as a writer. It's like wherever you can find to put your voice out there, it's your voice,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and you treasure and you work hard on what you put out. And it's not just a story. It's about his essential humanity. It's about the death by 1,000 cuts. It's about all these tiny things, you know, this little concession here, that little concession there. It's just a seat on a bus. It's just a water fountain. It's just a sandwich at a deli, right?
Mm-hmm.
um that it's not just that. There's so much more. And if it really is, as Pabst says, just a photo, then why is Pabst so worried about Benny not showing up?
Right.
You know, it's clearly not just a show, just a photo to Pabst,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And that's it's those little things all together. You know, people can get kind of out of sorts and be like, well, why are people getting upset about these little things, about words you use, and
Mm-hmm.
and you know, ways things are portrayed and whatever. Why are we, you know, people are so touchy, you know.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is that those little habits of being, they shape how we live every single day of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And when you are the person who is constantly having to hide yourself in all those little ways, constantly having to accommodate yourself in all those little ways, constantly having to accept the scorn of others and the judgment of others in all those little ways, every single day of your life, none of those things are little, because
Mm-hmm.
they all come together to form one big thing.
As my therapist has helped me to understand recently, trauma is too much for too long.
Right. Right. Exactly. Exactly. And too much can come a little bit at a time.
It can, you know, of course, it can come a whole lot in one little instant, but it can
Yes.
also come a little bit at a time for
A long time.
decades.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's it's a fresh wound every time. I read a quotation not long ago, by Ursula K. Le Guin from her book
Mm-hmm.
The Lathe of Heaven.
Mm-hmm.
Love doesn't just sit there like a stone. It has to be made like bread, remade all the time, made new. And I think that's such a beautiful idea that, like, you know, scriptures talk about being transformed by the renewing of our minds. And I like to talk about the fact that our minds being renewed is a constant process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's a renewal toward love. And I think that's what's going on, what she's talking about there. And the reason the bread has to be made, you know, the reason it has to be constantly remade is because we're constantly coming up against things that attack that love, or that we're constantly meeting little pieces of hate, little pieces of hurt. And it's one of the reasons, because love is active. Love is a verb. It's something you do. It's not just something you feel.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just something you think. It's a choice that you make, and it's an active choice. And so remaking that bread, and it's not just within one person's life. I think it goes generation to generation. And when you talk about, when Jesus talks about loving your neighbor, right, loving your neighbor as yourself, it's that kind of love. It's an active love, it's an ongoing love, and it's a love that sees and hears and understands your neighbor and listens to your neighbor. It can be
Mm-hmm.
really easy, because when Benny Russell is having his moment there in that office and he's clearing all the stuff off the table, you know, and you
Mm-hmm.
know, and saying, you know, and saying, you know, wishing never changed a damn thing, you know,
Mm-hmm.
that whole moment. I mean, that discomfort that everybody else in the room is feeling, it's off-putting. It's frightening. You want to step away from it. You want to shrink back from it. You want to say, Benny, hold on. You know, he's like, no, I'm done holding on. You know, somebody has to say this. Somebody has to show you how fresh and how real this is. And it can be very uncomfortable. And it can be very difficult to listen to somebody whose pain we don't understand, whose experience we don't know, who may be foreign to us, who may be even somebody who we've been taught to judge in one way or another. And to listen, like I was talking earlier, listen with compassion.
You know, I think I absolutely agree with you. I feel like there's a subset that just makes me think of, for some people, it's not hard to hear that when you're right next to them. But it is hard to hear someone else tell you that someone else is going through this. You know, like if we're trying to have a conversation with another white person and we're trying to get this across to them, maybe it's harder for them to empathize through our eyes, if that makes sense.
The farther removed you are.
Yeah, right, exactly. They're further removed, and that makes it more difficult for them to accept, I think, that
the reality.
Yeah.
And yet that nearness is so frightening because it is confrontational. And it might demand, you know, that old Joan Osborne song, "What if God was one of us?"
Oh, I love that song.
You know, if God had a face, would you want to see it? If see meant you had to believe, right? What would an encounter with God demand of you? And what does an encounter with the Imago Dei, the image of God in your neighbor, demand of you? Because when you've othered that other person and they look back at you at eyes which reflect the image of God, where you can see them as another child of God, when you can see that the love that they have for their family is real and it's not something that you can dismiss, then it's really hard to tell them that you judge them in some way or that they're wrong in some way. It's really hard to do that. It's challenging. And it can ask you to question things and to grow and to go in new directions that can be scary. But it's worth it. It's worth it.
Well said. I don't think I can add anything to that.
I think we got there. I think that worked.
I think we did. Yeah. So we're starting to collect.
And please, and anytime, share your thoughts with on any of this stuff with us.
Oh, please
via email and all that stuff. I mean, you know, please, we want to hear from you. Go ahead.
Yeah, Beth, this is addressed to you. Feel free to email the show if you want to. Quit giving me notes and just email the show.
gospeltrackpodcast@gmail.com.
So we're collecting. We're starting to collect some questions now. I think we've got about four on the deck.
5 or 6. Got a few.
We've got a handful.
So we're going to start working through them.
Yep. And this first one comes from a listener. Since we're on the topic of Deep Space Nine a bit, do you think Star Trek missed an opportunity not doing Deep Space Nine crew movies or Voyager movies after the shows ended?
I have puzzled over that many a time because Deep Space Nine has such a definitive ending, especially. Well, and Voyager does too, but they both leave things hanging in the air, right? You know, we want to know what happens when Ben comes back at the end of Deep Space Nine. The end of Deep Space Nine, we want to know what happens to the Voyager crew when they get to Earth. The end of Voyager is very abrupt. You know, it's like, okay, kids, we're here. You know,
yeah, and they lived happily ever after.
They live happily ever after. We don't even see the kids hop out of the car. It's just like, all right, we made it. We arrived.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I think there's some, but then it's like, what story do you tell? Because all of these questions that are left hanging at the end of these series are, you know, would have long answers, and that's why we have lots of Deep Space Nine and Voyager books.
Right.
So especially for the people who love the books, I don't know.
When DS9 ended, I definitely wanted more. I wanted a film back in when was it? In the early 2000s? Yeah. I definitely wanted a film, but I think there's nowhere for either Deep Space Nine or Voyager to go in a film as those properties, right? Like
Yeah.
you could take Voyager and you could take out Janeway and do a film or a series following her. You could do something with some of the other crew as they go through their development within Starfleet back in the Alpha Quadrant. But I don't think as Voyager you could do anything with that, or as Deep Space Nine. Like Deep Space Nine ended with everybody going their separate ways. Miles goes off to Earth, and obviously Cisco is among the prophets, and
Right. You can kind of tie Deep Space Nine back together in a way because you have Cisco as such a central figure, and his narrative is so important to everything else. Everything else can hinge on his narrative.
right.
And that's kind of, if you watch the documentary "What We Left Behind" on Deep Space Nine, that's kind of what they talk about. And when they're working, when they're breaking season 8 of Deep Space Nine, they're talking about, well, what would bring everybody back together, and of course, well, it's Ben. And
right.
and so, but of course, I think that's been explored in the novels to some degree. So I mean, there's a catalyst there, but Deep Space Nine is involved in such long storytelling. Like, what big story can you tell with Deep Space Nine that would be a 2-hour movie? Would it kick off a series of movies? And then do you want to, like the original crew people have always said that, every time they made a Star Trek movie, they thought it was the last one. Because they just didn't expect it to be successful enough to get another movie. And there's always that question when you're dealing with making movies. It's, well, even with making a series, I mean, Enterprise was canceled early. So when they were planning to go 7 seasons. So,
and sorry, go on. I just soapbox. I'm so frustrated with where Enterprise ended, because it was getting right to what I wanted to see.
I know. And they were doing it anyway. But yeah, we can get on Enterprise another time. But and Voyager, same way. I mean, it's like, yes, I would love to see what happens to them on Earth. I would love to see Chakotay and Seven break up. I would love to see
well, clearly they do.
I would love to see Chakotay and Kathy get together. I mean, that would be awesome.
Really?
Oh yes. Chakotay and Janeway, I totally ship that. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh man. But still, it's like, what's the big story, that's going to draw them out? So I just don't know that it's a thing that could have been done, particularly at the time, because it wasn't terribly long later. Voyager ended, and then we had a little gap, a few months, and then Enterprise started, and that was the first time we had one Trek on the television for a while there. It wasn't the first time, but it was, one Trek starting without any other Trek on the air. It felt like we had a gap, but it was just a few months, just from one season to the next. and it was a network show, and that was when Star Trek started declining. And it just, I just don't think. And then the Next Generation movies weren't doing as well, and it just, I think the feeling was that the market was getting oversaturated with Star Trek, which is weird given what's going on in our current context, and yet it seems to be working. So would it have been a possibility? I don't know. Would it have been narratively necessary? I don't know. It would have been interesting, but I don't know.
Honestly, I think the best way they could have done that at the time was to, kind of like the MCU is doing now, just make it an expanded universe. Have the Enterprise stop at Deep Space Nine. The little Janeway cameo that they had, just little things to do to tie everything together, to give it a flavor. Yeah.
And you can shift one direction in one movie, one direction in another movie, and it's all toward this big plot. I mean, movies weren't made that way back then.
Right.
But that would be cool. Yeah, you're right. There, you solved it. Congratulations.
Huzzah.
The answer is always Marvel.
So right? Someone put me in charge.
Right.
No, don't do that. That would be a bad idea.
Don't. It would be a terrible. No, it wouldn't actually.
Hey, now.
But anyway, hey.
You're not supposed to agree with me there. You're supposed to say,
right.
No, Tim, you're a creative genius.
It would be perfect.
Thank you.
Oh, boy. So I hope that answers your question. Thank you for asking it. And please send us more thoughts, ideas, questions, comments, and hints, allegations, and things left unsaid. We love to hear them.
Wow. Say that 5 times fast.
That's just an old saying of mine. So, Tim, what do we have coming up next week?
Well, Kevin, next week we'll cover the 4th episode of Discovery and see what comes up.
Yeah, this is getting to sound familiar, but you know, it's working out. I'm liking it. This is fun. So I'm excited. I hope everyone will join us. In the meantime, please like, share, comment, and subscribe, and rate. And if you're on YouTube, be sure to ring the notification bell. And please send us your questions. Gospel According to Star Trek on Twitter and on Facebook, or gospeltrekpodcast@gmail.com. We would love to discuss your question on the show. Tim, do you have anything else to say to the folks at home?
You know, a couple of nights ago, I had a dream that I had the most perfect, like absolutely perfect. It didn't get any better. The most perfect Star Trek pun. And I can't remember what it was.
Well, that's a shame.
It's killing me.
And you know what's killing me is that I can't come up with a pun to come back to that with. So, but that's okay. That's where we're going to leave it. We're going to let that wrap it up for this edition of the Gospel According to Star Trek podcast. We thank you so much for being here, and until next time,
I'm Tim Van Orden.
And I'm Kevin C. Neeson. As Jesus said in John 10:10, live long and prosper.
See you next time.